Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Becky and I am the owner and artist of the Simple Spruce Studio. If you enjoy thrifting, flipping items, going to estate sales, flea markets, garage sales, make sure you check out my channel, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. What I do is just take old, worn out, discarded items and flip them, give them new life, and either keep them for use in my own home or I resell them on my website at thesimplesprucestudio.com. So today I am going to show you 3 chairs that I had donated to me. Actually, it was my dog groomer. She was actually going to throw them out. She thought there were 4, but she could only find the 3. So, of course, when I seen them, I thought they were adorable. They do fold up. As you can see this one here, they fold up. They do need some work, which we're going to take care of that. But we're going to take these, we're going to paint them and put some, reupholster the new top, put new tops on them, and again, just give them new life. So, and spruce them up just a little bit. So I'm going to start with taking them apart and sanding them down a little bit, seeing what kind of work each one of them needs, and then we'll go from there. All right, guys, stay with me. Okay, here we are out in my garage, and I have taken the screws out of the seat bottoms and am trying to get the screws out, which takes a little force, but we get them out. I'm going to set the chair aside and I'm going to start with the seat of the chairs. And I've noticed that there's no staples. That's how old these are. And I'm showing you here. They are tiny little rusted nails. And they're so cute. Of course, I'm going to end up keeping as many of them as I can. So here I'm trying to get them out because the heads of these little nails they're tiny. So I just keep trying to get those out and finally decide just to start ripping once I get a spot free. So, and there is no saving the pleather or vinyl, whatever it is that was on the covers, or the foam that was underneath. You'll see here that it's pretty worse for wear. I will peel that off, but you'll notice that the wood seat is falling apart also. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this one as a template to cut. I'm going to use 6 sheets, 6 pieces I'm going to cut. So here I'm just tracing it out. And I'm going to take my jigsaw and I'm going to cut out 6 of those. And the reason I'm doing 6 because I want 2 per chair. Because my plywood that I had there was, to me, it wasn't substantial enough to make a seat. I thought it was kind of flimsy. So what I wanted to do was double it to give it more support. And when I use my jigsaw on this, of course, it splinters the ends. So here I'm just going to sand down the edges, get rid of some of the splinters, and smooth it out just a little bit. Use my rotary sander for that. And you can see I've got my template. So I end up cutting 5 more of those. And then we're going to take the chair, and it's got some grime and some raised spots where we pulled off the seat there. So I just sanded it down a little bit, scuffed up the legs, and now we are going to paint. And I am using Krylon's Chalky Finish white paint. So, and it gives it a really nice chalk paint texture and finish. And I think this is the point where my husband comes out and says, why don't you turn the chair over and paint the bottom first? So, of course, I take his advice. I turn the chair over and paint the bottom. So, and this paint, I got it at our local Ace Hardware, but I think you can get it at Lowe's, and maybe even Walmart. I'm not sure, but there are a couple different kinds of chalky finish spray paints. But I will put the link down in my description. Okay, so after those all three get spray painted and they're drying, I'm taking my seat bottoms and we are going to cut out a drop cloth. This is your typical drop cloth fabric that you can get at any of your hardware stores, Lowe's, Home Depot. I got mine, I think, at our local Ace Hardware. So all I do is I lay one of the boards down on top of my drop cloth and cut out the size I want, leaving several inches to be able to fold over the wood and or the base there and staple it to the bottom. So there I'm just kind of marking the size of the seat bottom. And we're going to do some grain sack striping, and then we're going to use some JRV stencils to stencil a picture onto them. And we're going to do this for all three of them. So yes, guys, I don't usually measure. So seeing me use a tape measure is kind of rare. But then after the first one, I don't use it on the next two. I eyeball everything. So all I'm trying to do is find the center, because when I do the grain sack striping, I want to put one piece of painter's tape right down the middle and then place two pieces on each side and then remove, which you'll see here in just a minute. I'm using the blue painter's tape, but I find that the masking tape that you can get from the dollar store works very well when you're doing grain sack striping because you can see through it better. So once you get your center stripe on and you go to tape off to do the 2 or 3 stripes or 4 stripes on the sides of them, on the side of the middle stripe, it's easier to tape off because you can see through the tape and see where you're laying the tape. It'll make more sense once you see. So there I just removed the middle one. So right in the middle of those two pieces is going to be my first and the widest grain sack stripe. And I think what I'm going to use here is Aviary. DIY paint Aviary. It's a chalk paint. And it's a really pretty green color. And I'm using a JRV stencil brush. And I will put a link in the description if anybody's interested in knowing where I purchased mine. I mean, you can actually Google and see who your closest or local stockist, if you have a stockist close to you that carries DIY or JRV. But I will put the link to where I actually purchased mine. Okay, so when you're stenciling, they usually say you don't need a lot of paint. You usually want to put paint on your brush. That's why I'm using what is on the lid, because you don't need a whole lot. And then offload your brush onto a towel or a rag, or I used a paper towel. And usually less paint on your brush is better if you're stenciling so it doesn't bleed through. But when you're doing it on fabric, I've realized that I do offload my brush each time, but not as much as I would if I had a stencil, an actual stencil down. The fabric soaks up the paint a little bit more and quicker than other surfaces, so it does require a little bit more paint on your brush. So, and there I just decided to put a piece of paper underneath my drop cloth just to keep most of the paint off my table and easy cleanup. Plus, I didn't want to get paint on the table and it soaked through on the drop cloth where I didn't want it. So I just continue to fill that in, and then I'm going to remove the 2 pieces of tape, and then I'm going to take my heat gun just to speed up the process, the drying process. So here I just pull those off. And then you'll see how nice of a crisp line that you get. I didn't go all the way to the ends, if you notice there, closest to me, because I know that part's going to be folded over. And here I'm just going in and filling in a few spots where it soaked in or it just didn't get filled in. And now I'm going to dry it. And if you notice when I'm drying this, how much lighter that chalk paint gets. It always dries much lighter, which I love because it gives it that more of that rustic farmhouse kind of look. And also chalk paint is can be reactivated. It's water soluble. It can be reactivated if it's gets wet. So these will need to be heat sealed. So after they have all fully dried, I do go back over them later with a hot iron and seal in the paint. Okay, so here's where I was talking about being able to see through the tape. I am not lining that up perfectly with the center stripe. I am going over the side just a little bit because I want a gap between the middle stripe and the next stripe that I'm going to put on. And I'm just reusing one of the pieces of tape I'd already used there. And I want this line to be thinner because if you notice, that is not as thick as the first stripe that we did. And you'll see when I remove the tape, the gap that I put in between the middle stripe and this thin stripe. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. I'm just moving that piece of tape out from the middle stripe just a little bit. And then I'm going to add that other piece of tape and make it a thin stripe. Now you can do as many stripes as you want on these grains. There is no rhyme or reason. I like the look of just doing one wide stripe down the middle and then one thinner stripe on each side of that. But I've seen it to where a lot of people have done 2 to 3 stripes on each side of the center stripe, and it looks great. And maybe if I had like a wider, like if I was doing a longer bench or something, but these chair seats are not that big. So I am choosing just to do one stripe on each side. So like if I had a wider surface or a bigger area that I was working with, I might do 2 to 3 stripes on each side of the center one. So, but same process. I just dip my stencil brush into the paint that's on the lid and offload it just a little bit onto a paper towel. And just make sure when you put your tape down that you rub it down good so it's not buckled up so you don't have any bleed through. And here we're going to pull this tape off and see how nice our grain sack striping looks. I love it. And I'm going to take the heat gun again and dry it, because I am putting a JRV stencil in the middle of the grain sack stripes. And again, I will put the link in the description to where you can find where I purchased my supplies. Which the DIY paint, the DIY paint, the stencils that I'm getting ready to use, and the stencil brushes I purchased from the same place. So here I'm just trying to decide which one I want to use, and you can tell the one that I am picking has been one of my favorites because it's well used. And you don't have to use the full stencil. You can tape off any part of it, like the bottom part. If you don't want that, you can tape off the greenery around the edges if you don't want to use that part. You don't have to use the full stencil. You can mix and match, only use part of it, however you want. There's a lot of versatility to these stencils. Okay, so here I'm just going to tape down my stencil. I'm going to put a piece of tape on each side just to hold it in place so it doesn't move around on me while I'm stenciling. And also on the right and the left side, the little greenery vine thing is a little close to the edge. So I am taping that off also to keep from going off of my stencil and getting paint onto the drop cloth where I don't want it. And I am using a much smaller JRV stencil brush for this. I did not need one as big as I did for the striping. So, and I am using weathered wood DIY chalk paint for this stencil. I did not want to use, you can use black if you want, but my thought is I did not want the bright, crisp, dark black to this. I want it to look more aged in farmhouse, like it's been on there for a little bit. So I didn't want that stark, crisp black color. So that's why I chose to use weathered wood in DIY paint. Also, there is a color that you can get from Walmart. It's toasted poppy seed. That color is also kind of like a charcoal, dark gray color that would work real well too, which is another one of my favorites. And it's a chalk paint also. So yeah, so I do the same thing. I just dip my brush into the paint that's on the lid, offload it, and offload it onto a paper towel, and then start stenciling in. And like I said, I'm not looking, the drop cloth will soak up the paint more than other surfaces, than wood or something like that. So, and I don't want it to be like a perfect crisp image. And you can see there, you know, it looks like it's, you know, it's a little bit lighter. It's not fully colored. And then I'm just going to dry that. And then we're going to move on to cutting some batting, which I think I got my batting and my foam from a local store here in town. They have a quilting department. It's above our Ace Hardware. So I went and bought some batting and some foam cushion, and I cut the foam cushion to the size of my board of the chair base. And now I'm going to put the batting, I'm unrolling the batting right now, and then I'm going to lay it, there I'll show you the quilt batting that I'm using. And then I unroll it, I lay out one of the corners onto my drop cloth, and I cut the batting to the size of the drop cloth piece that we just stenciled on. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to have excess. So when you turn over, when you wrap it around the chair seat that you're going to staple it to, then you're going to have excess. So you're going to be able to cut off. And there I'm trying to cut it without cutting the drop cloth underneath it. So yeah, I get that cut out. So on the bottom, I have the drop cloth upside down, so it's face down. And then I have the piece of batting on top of the drop cloth. And then I'm going to add the foam piece that I cut the size of the board. I'm going to lay that on the batting and then the board. And then I'm just checking to make sure I've got it lined up, that my grain sack striping and stencil are going down the center of the cushion as best as can be. I'm just eyeing it. You know, here we don't do perfection. I mean, we want it to look good, but if I got to adjust my camera here, it keeps wanting to fall. Um, if we, if I felt that I had to do everything completely perfect, I'd never get anything done. So, but yeah, so, and then all I'm going to use is my handheld stapler. And I'm checking to see if what staples I had left in there. And I think they're the long ones. Yeah, I think those were the long ones. And my boards are not that thick. So when I go to staple, I do not want the staples coming up, which I showed you right there, that the long ones were in there. So I got shorter staples and put in there because I do not want the staple to go through the board. So when you sit in the chair that you get poked with the ends of the staples. So what I do here is I pull in the middle of all four sides and put one staple. I do each side like that. And you want to pull it taut, but not too tight that you distort your lines, your grain sack striping on the other side, because you can pull too tight and it's going to pull it more so in one direction than the other, and your line's not going to stay straight. But you don't want it too loose either to where it's not going to look good. So like I said, I just start with one staple in the middle of each side. Now I turn it over and check to make sure it's still lined up. And then I just continue stapling all the way around. And like I said, you'll notice that there is quite a bit of excess on the batting and the drop cloth, which is it's good. I mean, you don't want too much that you can't work with, but you want enough that you are not cutting it too close that you can't get it stapled or it's pulling loose or something. So if you notice, I just keep turning it over and checking to make sure it's still centered, lined up. I'm not pulling too tight. And then I'll put a few staples in, move, turn it to do the next side, and I save the corners till last. And we're going for the farmhouse look, so we're not doing professional reupholstering, so don't freak out. It's easy to do. I know a lot of people think maybe it's a little intimidating, but it's not. You don't have to have the perfect corners, and but you notice I had too much on the corners there, so I do have to cut that down so it's easier to work with. So I cut the excess off. And then you'll see here, I start to fold in the corners. And I usually put 3 staples in each corner. So I just fold it in and then down. Put one on each side of the fold and then one above those in the middle. And it holds good. And then here I'm just cutting off the excess to make sure that it's all gonna lay flat. You don't want to leave all that excess fabric on there because it's gonna give you trouble trying to screw the seat back onto the chair if you've got too much bulk. So again, I was just turning it over, checking to make sure that everything looked good on the other side. And again, I just fold in. Well, I run out of staples and have to reload. And I just fold in the sides into the center there and then fold that piece down. And then again, put one staple on each side of that fold and then one in the middle. And then we cut that bulky part, the excess, off. And if you have some staples that don't go all the way in, all you have to do is take a hammer and tap them all the way down into the wood so they're not sticking up, because you don't want anything to keep you from being able to screw the seat back onto the chair, or make it a little wonky. So again, just fold those in and then down, and add 3 more staples. And when I do cut the excess off, I'm not cutting all the way up to the staples, but close enough to where you don't have so much bulk. There I had one staple that was put in too far in, so I just removed it. And continue stapling. And the more you work with this, I mean, you'll be able to tell how close you need to staple and how many staples you feel is going to hold good and make it lay flat and not pull loose. So I cut the rest of that off. And then there is our finished project. How nice. It looks good. So here we're back to the chairs. After they have dried, and we are going to add, there is that nice little detail right in the middle of the backs of the chairs. So my thoughts were to use my IOD stamps, number stamps, and I'm going to number each chair. So all I'm doing is adding some permanent ink to the number 1, and I am going to press that down, and be careful not to let your stamp slide, and look how awesome that looks. So I'm going to continue that with the next 2 chairs. I'm going to number 1, 2, and 3. So wish I had 4 of these chairs, but that's okay. They turn out so adorable. And I do seal the chairs with a polyacrylic, but I'm going to show you here in just a second what all 3 of the finished chairs look like. They turned out beautiful, and you can find these chairs for sale. Look at that. Look how nice that looks. So I do just take drywall screws and screw the bottoms back on, because the old screws were pretty much done for. But here you go. Here is a look at all 3 of the chairs finished with their number 2 and number 3 on the back of them. How cute, modern farmhouse they are. And like I said, I do seal the paint on the chairs with a polyacrylic spray. So, and you can find these chairs for sale on my website at thesimplesprucestudio.com. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.